In any case, were I to invoke logic, logic clearly dictates that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few.
I am a logical man, Doctor.
Well, it'll take more than logic to get us out of this.
Logic is a little tweeting bird chirping in a meadow. Logic is a wreath of pretty flowers which smell bad.
The ears make all of the difference.
I find your arguments strewn with gaping defects in logic.
One does not thank logic, Amanda.
Logic. Logic. I'm sick to death of logic.
But it is very logical. There's that magic word again. Does your logic find this fascinating, Mr. Spock?
Our logic is to be illogical. That is our advantage. Mr. Spock, it is time. The explosive.
Very well, Captain.
Logic suggests.
Logic? My God, the man's talking about logic. We're talking about universal Armageddon.
Commence primary ignition.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Logic Blaster podcast. This is episode 7 of the podcast, and I've got a very cool topic to cover for you today. We're going to be talking about 12-inch G.I. Joe, a certain segment of my collection. So I'm going to focus on the Marines, the specific division of the military, and what I'm going to show you today is mostly Hasbro product. And it's stuff that was produced primarily in the late 1990s, early 2000s. A lot of it's from the 40th anniversary series. But I have done a lot of customizing and kit bashing to quite a few of these figures. And we're going to walk through one by one and take a look at these. I'm very happy with, for the most part, with this collection. And I'm going to run the video full screen so we can get a good look at these individual figures. I will provide commentary. Also, I'm going to run a brief clip from my articulation guide, the specific portion that covers the articulation on the 40th anniversary G.I. Joes, just so you guys can see that. Most of you will be familiar with the articulation on the vintage style Joe, but for people who aren't, I want to make sure to have that footage in here just so I can have it be complete. So I'm going to take myself off screen, and I will come back later towards the end of the podcast, and I'll give you my final thoughts on this collection. So here we have my collection of vintage style Marines, and as you can see, there's 8 figures here altogether, and each one of them has sort of unique characteristics, and I consider this to be one of the more complete kind of collections that I have among my 12-inch G.I. Joes. It's still, some of these are sort of a work in progress in terms of actually getting everything the way that I want them. But for the most part, I'm pretty happy with this particular collection. And the uniforms are all very colorful, and that's one of the aspects about collecting Marines among the G.I. Joe line that is actually quite appealing, just the colorful nature of what they look like all grouped together. So I'm going to walk you through each one of these. Most of the figures here are from the 40th anniversary. There is one back here that's from the Timeless collection. And then the gear is a mixture of stuff from 40th anniversary, Timeless collection, Classic collection, certain items that I acquired from Cotswold Collectibles, and various other sources. So I'll talk a little bit about that as we get into each individual figure as I walk you through these. And I'll go into the specifics about how I've customized and kit bashed these to make them each kind of unique. So let's go ahead and get into it. So before we get into talking about the specific figures, I wanted to discuss a little bit about the way that these were packaged in the 40th anniversary line. As the Timeless collection evolved, they got to the anniversary, the 40th anniversary, and which was 2004. Because the original 1960s G.I. Joe debuted in 1964. So they decided to, do sort of faithful reproductions of the packaging, and just the whole style and aesthetic of it was very reminiscent of the 1960s. So they produced the coffin boxes and then the window boxes with the accessory sets. And these came in like a very large kind of green box with everything grouped together. So you'd get a figure, and an accessory set, or maybe a bunch of little carded sets all in one big package. And it was a really interesting way of going about it, and I really love the packages too. So this is the standard box for the Marine, and on the side of the box you can see some of the various sets they actually reproduced. So you can see communications, dress Marine, beachhead assault field pack set, Paratrooper, and down here you can see reproductions of the original artwork. So these were the sort of coffin style boxes that these came in, and basically inside of this box you would get the standard figure, which was dressed in sort of this camouflage fatigues, and there's quite a bit of variation in terms of the way the camouflage looked. Actually, some of them come with 2 pockets on the front, and the color kind of varies from figure to figure. Each one of them also came with a cap, and most of them were plastic, but there were a few sets that actually came with sort of like a cloth version of this cap. Each one also came with the field manual too, so pretty good reproduction of the Marine manual. So you can see they have a description of all the equipment in the various sets. And one valuable thing about this particular manual is actually, not only does it show all the equipment, but it actually gives you instructions on how to assemble things as well. So in terms of the field pack, they show you how to actually put it all together, the position of everything. And so that's very helpful. And they show you how to fold the poncho and how to fold the tent and everything. So very useful manual. So it's actually quite nice that they actually reproduced this as well. Other things that came with this, you got sort of these stickers that you could apply to the uniform. So that was kind of cool as well. And you also got the reproduction of the removal of boots instructions. So again, a very helpful thing in terms of, dealing with a sort of vintage style figure. So this is one of the medic sets that I kept in the package, and I just think it looks really fantastic. So yeah, I have yet to break this open. I have, for my medic figure, I have most of this equipment in similar form. I have a version of the stretcher from the classic collection. Also, this plasma bottle, a stethoscope. I have a vintage version of the medic bag. So most of the items I actually have already equipped on my medic. The only thing I'm missing is these little armbands. I'm hoping, because I know Cotswold used to do a reproduction of this, and I'm hoping that they'll bring that back so I can get armbands for my figure without having to bust this open. So I think it just looks really fantastic in the package, and I've been able to preserve it for all these years. So yeah, I'm tempted to just leave it that way. On the back of the package, you can see the original artwork for the various divisions of the military on the back. So very cool that they did a full-on reproduction of those sort of window boxes. And I just think overall, in terms of the approach of this 40th anniversary line, it was really well executed, and it actually, I believe it helped inspire the Action Man 40th anniversary line, because if you look at the way those sets are packaged, the approach to the packaging is very similar to the way it was done for the G.I. Joe line. So yeah, it helped inspire a whole series of vintage style reproductions going forward. So the first Marine figure I want to show you is probably the most straightforward one. This is basically in the standard uniform, and he's almost fully outfitted in terms of the way the field pack is arranged. I've got the tent over top of it. I've got the entrenching tool, and I don't have the sleeping bag inside of here, and I also don't have the poncho. I have the poncho on another figure, and I don't think I actually have the sleeping bag. I'm trying to remember if they actually reproduced that at some point in the Timeless collection. But he's almost fully realized in terms of all the equipment that he has. And I gave him this version of the rifle, which is very cool looking. He also has a pistol. And in terms of the helmet, this one actually came with one of the Timeless collection sets that was earlier. This one is actually made of die-cast metal, so it's actually makes him a little top heavy, but I really like the way that it looks, and it's actually easy to keep it clean, just because it doesn't have dust adhere to it like the plastic items do. So yeah, you can just sort of wipe it down and keep that nice and shiny as a helmet. So I really like that, and obviously has the reproduction dog tag and the boots. And one thing that should be noted about the boots, if you leave these things exposed to too much light, particularly sunlight, these will turn green over time. So you just want to be careful in terms of protecting certain items from exposure to the sun. So, because yeah, it causes some discoloration. I have some of these that have actually turned green, or parts of them have turned green, the parts that were exposed to the sun. So just keep that in mind. You want to make sure to protect these items. So very cool looking figure, and definitely one of my favorites that I have in this. And I have this on the African American version of the 40th anniversary figure. And I just think it looks really cool, and sort of represents a sort of, standard kind of Marine figure. So the next figure I want to show you is the Marine Communications Officer, and this is the one that includes the poncho. So I only have one version of the poncho, so if I had two, I would do a version that was rolled up with the previous figure that I just showed you. But this one is very cool, includes a lot of communications gear, including this radio backpack set, which is very interesting. I've included this version of the rifle with him. He's also got the wire coil, which is interesting. He also comes with the field telephone set, so that's very interesting as well. So I can show you what that looks like. So this is a very cool accessory. Includes like a little telephone receiver inside of it. So very cool. I remember having one of these when I was a kid. So very cool to have a reproduction of it. And in terms of the uniform on this, this is actually one of the earlier Timeless Collection uniforms that have actually dyed a little bit darker in color to sort of be in keeping with the rest of the 40th anniversary line. And this helmet actually is from a different line of toys. I don't recall which one. It might have been Formative International or whatever, but it had this sort of cloth cover, and I did a little bit of painting on it to sort of bring the colors up to par with the uniform. And I just think it looks very cool to have a version of the helmet has the cloth cover, and I think it looks very cool with this particular set. Also comes with the binoculars and obviously the dog tag and the brown boots. So overall, very cool figure. Very nice to have a communications officer with my Marine collection. So next figure I want to show you is the Dress Marine, and once again, just the colors on this just really pop, just in terms of the overall look of the uniform and everything. This is obviously the dressed up version of the Marine. It comes with a white belt, a white version of the M1 Grand rifle, has the pistol as well, reproduction dog tag, reproduction of the hat. So looking very sharp. And the one thing that I added to this, actually two things, because the original version of this 40th anniversary set came with the wrong size shoes. They actually packed in ones that were done for the Hall of Fame style G.I. Joes. So they were too small to actually fit on the feet of the 40th anniversary ones. So you had to either order a reproduction of it or wait until the Dress Pilot set came out when they actually reproduced the correct size shoes. And I've also added socks to this because without the socks, you just see those bare ankles showing. So it looks kind of awkward. So I think for a long time, a lot of people just had their Dress Marine wearing standard boots instead of the dress shoes. But I'm glad that my version now has the dress shoes and looks very cool. So very excited to have this one. I just think in terms of the overall execution of the uniform and everything, I just think it's a classic. You really can't argue with the fact that this is probably one of the more iconic Marine sets there is. Next set I just want to show you contains a lot of gear from the Timeless Collection instead of the 40th anniversary, including the uniform and also the flak vest. This uniform is actually the same uniform that I showed you previously on the version with the poncho. So that one I had actually dyed a darker color, but this one I left the way it was originally issued. So this is very much the style of uniform that they were using for those early Timeless Collection Marine sets. And I think it looks very cool. It's very nice to have that kind of variation. And this flak vest came with the heavy weapons set. I believe the grenades are from the 40th anniversary. pouches probably are as well. And this belt, I believe, might be from either Timeless Collection or Classic Collection. And the rifle, I don't think is Hasbro at all, but it very much is in keeping with the same proportions as a Hasbro rifle. Has the brown boots, reproduction dog tag, the binoculars, and this helmet here is actually from the Classic Collection. I just think in terms of the proportions and overall deco, it seemed to go really well with this particular uniform. I believe this this helmet came with one of those top secret order accessory sets. And again, the proportions and everything are very, very similar to a vintage style helmet. So I think it goes really well with the set, and just overall, in terms of the look of the figure, the color scheme and everything, I'm very happy with the way this one turned out. So this next set I like to call my Paratrooper Medic set, basically because it combines the Paratrooper parachute pack with a bunch of medic kind of gear. And it does include one vintage item as well. So this medic bag right here is actually a vintage item that I've sort of restored. I kind of dyed it a little bit too dark. It was very faded when I initially was given this as kind of a piece of junk. A fellow G.I. Joe collector, he had a whole bunch of beat up equipment that he was sort of looking to offload. And so he gave me this, and I was able to sort of bring it back to life and make it look pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it overall. But again, when I did the dye job on it, it sort of made it a little bit too dark. But that's okay. I mean, it makes it unique and kind of interesting compared to the original vintage one. So I also included these little pouches. You can get these from Cotswold Collectibles, these little medic pouches. There's one here and one here. And they also have the first aid kit here. And there's also this plasma bottle here, and also the stethoscope. The stethoscope and plasma bottle are from the Classic Collection. So, yeah, they're not accurate to the 40th anniversary or vintage, but they do just fine in terms of, being stand-ins. Again, I don't really feel like opening up that 40th anniversary set because it really looks fantastic in the package, and to me there's not enough difference between those vintage items and these items to really warrant opening it up just to get them out. The medic helmet actually was an item that was sold originally through the G.I. Joe Collectors Club, and I believe they sold them in 4-packs. I didn't end up ordering it from them, but Cotswold Collectibles eventually got a bunch of them, so I was able to just order an individual medic helmet. So this is an official 40th anniversary item, but it wasn't actually sold in any of the original 40th anniversary sets. So overall, really enjoy this outfit, and this is one of the variants of the uniform as well. As you can see, this one includes the pockets on the front of the uniform, which makes it different from the first one that I showed you, which is sort of more standard kind of Marine uniform. So it's nice to have variations in the kind of like look of the uniform. I believe the green on this is a little bit darker, a little deeper than that other uniform as well. So again, there's quite a bit of variation in terms of the overall look of these uniforms. But very happy to have the medic in my collection, and I also have this stretcher. So again, this is from the Classic Collection, so there are differences between this version of the stretcher and the one that comes with the 40th anniversary set. But to me, the differences aren't significant enough for me to want to break open that set, because I do have a stretcher which looks close enough to work just fine for my medic. So next figure I want to show you is the Marine Jungle Fighter, and this is a figure that I only just recently completed. Cotswold Collectibles actually got in this sort of reproduction of the uniform, and I don't recall the name of the company that actually produced this, but I was very excited when they got these in stock because it meant I was able to order just the missing uniform that I was needed to complete the set, because I had all the other gear. I had the flamethrower, I had the knife, I had this hat, which is from the Australian Jungle Fighter, reproduction dog tag, the belt is 40th anniversary, machete, and the canteen. So in terms of being more or less complete, it's nearly there. I'm missing a couple items that would make it fully complete according to the original vintage item. So I would need an M16. There's also a unique version of the field telephone that goes with the Marine Jungle Fighter, which I don't have. So I may be looking for those items at some point in the future. But for the most part, I'm pretty happy with the way this looks. In terms of the coloration of the uniform and the various insignia, it does very much resemble that original Marine Jungle Fighter uniform. So I'm very happy to have a version of that in my collection now. So before I had that version of the Marine Jungle Fighter uniform, I actually had my Marine Jungle Fighter wearing a tiger stripe uniform. So having that leftover uniform, I decided to go ahead and create a new version of the Marine Jungle Fighter. So this version actually includes a uniform that's made by 21st Century Toys with the tiger stripe deco, which is very much reminiscent of the way fighters wore uniforms in Vietnam. So very cool pattern, camouflage pattern. And these 21st Century Toys uniforms have this sort of thickness of the fabric and texture that's very consistent with vintage, and they fit just fine on these Timeless Collection figures. So this is from the earlier Timeless Collection, and has a somewhat darker complexion than the other African American versions of the G.I. Joe, and so a pretty interesting variant. I like this one very much, and I was able to order this version of the hat from Cotswold Collectibles. It's done in like a dark green color, which makes it different from the other version. This M16, I believe, is also 21st Century Toys, and I include black boots with this one just to make it different. Some of the stuff is actually Classic Collection, and then some of this is 40th anniversary in terms of the gear on the belt. So sort of a mishmash of different items to create a unique version of the Marine Jungle Fighter, and use some of that leftover gear to create something completely unique for my collection. So the final figure that I want to show you today is my Tank Commander. And this is sort of a work in progress because I'm not entirely satisfied with this completely at this point. The goggles are definitely wrong just in terms of what should be with this particular figure. So I'm using these sort of Geiperman goggles as a substitute for now until I get ones that are more accurate. The helmet is actually a reproduction done by Cotswold Collectibles. It also has some differences to the original, but it's close enough. That doesn't really bother me too much. I've also included this leather jacket, which is actually more consistent with the way the Tank Commander looks in the Action Man line. So again, not exactly correct in terms of looking like a vintage G.I. Joe, but for now, I think I'm satisfied in terms of it being a reasonable substitute. It definitely looks like a Tank Commander, so even if it's not completely accurate. I believe the belt and canteen and pouch are Classic Collection items, and this grease gun, I think. It might be Geiperman. I can't recall. I got this from Cotswold Collectibles. It is, I believe, a reproduction, or it's from that era of European versions of G.I. Joe type figures. I think the binoculars are probably 40th anniversary reproduction dog tag, and the uniform is 40th anniversary. Boots are 40th anniversary. So overall, I'm fairly happy. They never got around to doing the Tank Commander in the 40th anniversary line. They did a very good reproduction of it in the Action Man 40th anniversary line, but I missed out on getting that, unfortunately. So I've sort of hobbled this together from bits and pieces from various sources. And again, I think it looks pretty cool, but it's not completely accurate for what should be a sort of vintage style G.I. Joe Tank Commander. But for now, I'm happy to have this in my collection. I think it looks pretty cool, even though there's some inaccuracies. It does have kind of a vintage feel to it, even if it doesn't look completely consistent with the original Tank Commander. And the example that I'm showing you today is a 40th anniversary reissue of that style of G.I. Joe, but the articulation on this one is pretty much identical to the original 1960s version. So at the head, he gets back and forth like this, and then also rotation from side to side. Very good articulation at the head on these original G.I. Joes. I actually think this is one of the better ones in terms of neck articulation. And this figure is held together with elastic bands. There's a piece of elastic that hooks to the 2 shoulder joints, and then also there's a separate piece of elastic that hooks from the neck post down to the 2 hip joints. So that's how this figure's held together. At the shoulder, he can extend out like this, and also gets a 360-degree rotation at the shoulder. At the bicep, there's a swivel joint like this. At the elbow, he gets bending back and forth like this. So pretty good extension upward at the elbow. At the wrist, there's bending back and forth like this, and it also has a pivot joint there. So very good on the wrist as well. At the waist, there's a side-to-side movement like this, front and back, and also rotation. At the hip, you can kick out, kick forward, kick back, and also there's a lot of thigh rotation as well. As you can see, there's a ball joint right here, so there's a lot of sort of rotation and movement. Because of the use of elastic, there's actually a lot of mobility actually at the hip joint. At the knee, there's a bend like this, and then at the ankle, it gets bending back and forth like this, and also rotation. So very good articulation on the original G.I. Joe. Quite innovative for the time period, 1964, to be able to have an action figure from that time period with this level of articulation was actually excellent. So there you have it. That's my collection of vintage style 12-inch G.I. Joe Marines. In terms of my overall collection, really G.I. Joe only represents maybe about 1/5 of the kinds of things that I actually have in my collection. But it is a segment of my collection that I'm quite passionate about. I really enjoy that particular format of 12-inch action figure, and the vintage look has a lot of nostalgia value for me, particularly Adventure Team ones, but I've gotten into the military ones quite a bit as well, so I'm pretty thrilled to share this with you. I may do another one of these that focuses on my 40th anniversary pilots. I have a pretty good collection of those as well. So the Marines were an obvious choice just because it is the largest of the collections of the 40th ones that I have. And so I decided to start there. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see me do a podcast about my pilots. It's a decent collection. I've covered quite a few of them on the channel, and it might actually make for a pretty interesting podcast if I showed you that entire collection all at once and just talked a little bit about it and covered some of the packaging and stuff like I did in this video. So let me know if you'd like to see that. And thank you so much for joining me today. I do have more episodes of the podcast in the works, so stay tuned to the channel for those. I'm going to try to do at least one per month. That's sort of the tentative plan. In terms of my time, that's probably about as much as I can actually manage. But I really enjoy doing these podcasts, sharing with you aspects of my collection, and also talking about other things like the various TV series and things like that that are part of the sort of pop culture world that I enjoy, and I like to share this stuff with you. So that's going to be it for the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time. Have a great day.